result for the Labour Party. It's not just a vote against the Conservatives, it's a vote for New Labour. Remember, we got a photograph taken of the VAT campaign.
Well done. Thank you so much.
I've written about some of my heroes, the Clydesiders, people who were elected from Glasgow, the west of Scotland, who took the slums into Parliament and made people see that things were wrong and had to be sorted out. And this idea that you start with a vision of what can be achieved, but you have the political will and determination, even to be unpopular, to actually see that vision through, is, I think, most important to me. And my political heroes are people who have done that.
Broken, has it not? Tonight, the British people have given us the chance to serve, and serve we will, with all our heart and all our mind.
On May 2nd this year, the Labour Party celebrated their greatest ever election victory. This film goes behind the scenes to show how they did it. For 6 months, we followed the man in charge of Labour's election strategy, the then Shadow Chancellor, Gordon Brown.
Gordon Brown's office? No, not really. It was just that Gordon putting forward positive proposals on unemployment. Okay, Mike. Cheers, bye. He won't do that. He won't do it. That was, yeah, Mike White, The Guardian, and John Williams, The Mirror. What are we going to do on top rate of tax, basically, is their obsession. And they'll sort of claim that we haven't said anything just because we haven't said anything on top rate of tax, and yet we've got books and great volumes of policy on everything on the economy. Because all the journalists want to know how much tax they're going to pay, don't they?
The purpose of this meeting is to, first of all, discuss the budget and generally economic strategy in the run-up to the general election. And I'm struck by the fact that the budget is now seen as an almost entirely political exercise on the part of the government. What I'm going to do is ask Ed, first of all, to present this paper, and then have a discussion about some of the issues arising over the next month.
What I'll just do is run through a few arguments in advance of that, which I think create a context for why we're arguing that things should be done in this way. It's a budget campaign which is effectively a general election campaign, and what we don't want to do is be caught in a trap, which is probably a 1964 trap, where you make so much fuss about the state of things.
Ed Balls was brought in from the Financial Times. He was the young Financial Times Journalist of the Year. He's still under 30. He was brought in to head up our economic expertise. With him, Ed Miliband, who's even younger, who works on the speech writing alongside him and does quite a lot of the political advice and strategy.
The most important thing with that is we're actually on the train. Rather surprising, to be honest. The taxi driver said that he wouldn't have done it for Kenneth Clark, but given that Gordon was his second favourite politician after Tony Benn, he was going to drive faster than normal. After Tony Benn. We chose not to point out to him that Tony Benn and Gordon Brown had rather different views on the kind of speech he would give to the CBI. We just shrugged and hoped he accelerated, and he made it. So it's fine. The only thing is we're a bit worried that we haven't brought the file with the jokes in. So we might come back. So we may have to make...
There are no jokes.
They are, yeah. We may have to make some jokes up on the way.
It's Armistice Day, and appropriately, Gordon Brown is going to meet what for old Labour would have been the enemy. He's the first Labour Shadow Chancellor ever to address the CBI annual conference.
It's not a question of us lobbying the CBI or asking them for endorsements. It's a question of us being given a platform to put forward our policies. I mean, we are the pro-business, pro-industry, pro-employment party, and I think after a few years of a Labour government, people will actually see Labour as more pro-business than the Tories have been. A business lunch I addressed in the States, where I was a British politician from the Labour Party, and the other chap who was speaking with me was introduced simply as a man who'd made $1 million from oil in Texas. And he stood up and he said, Mr. Chairman, he said, first of all, it wasn't Texas, it was Oklahoma. He then said, secondly, it wasn't oil, it was coal. He then said, thirdly, Mr. Chairman, it wasn't a million, it was 500,000. And then he said, fourthly, it wasn't me, it was my brother. And then he said, fifthly, he didn't make it, he lost it.
Bizarre, because they always laugh at my brother.
It's actually closer than it looks on.
Did Liam tell a joke? Was there any joke?
We got 5 written and prepared.
Does it need some...
That's a good change.
does it need to be enlivened?
I think these things always work. The problem with an audience like this, there'll be no reaction. It's a bit like an English opera audience. Just sit there to the end.
Gordon's going to have to make a speech to a large group of business people who will judge him, but a speech which will be transmitted around the world, and certainly seen on the 6 and 9 o'clock news tonight. And he's as nervous in terms of making sure that the speech goes well as he is nervous to make sure there are no slips. He's also nervous because he's going to tell 3 jokes, and if they don't laugh, the speech will die.
And then he said, fourthly, it wasn't me, it was my brother. And then added fifthly, and he didn't make it, he lost it.
You know, let's be honest, in the 1992 election, we weren't trusted on tax, we weren't trusted on spending, we weren't seen as a party which could take the long-term view. We were the quick-fix, short-term party. So what we're wanting to do is tell these people, we aren't a penal taxing party, we can make tough choices on spending, we are about the long term.
To that end, we will establish a new monetary policy committee within the Bank of England, bring greater openness and certainty to the decision-making system.
Is anybody exempt?
As
Gordon Brown wins the applause out front, behind the scenes his team take advantage of the press being there to push another part of their message for business.
Come on, you know exactly.
We aren't going to move beyond an agreed form of words, which is the right thing to do.
Can we give a special message to the Independent, though? Send the Independent special, because they seem to be rather obsessed with this. Is there anyone got any other questions on the speech? We're going to take on being tough on inflation for the sort of evening news bulletins. So I think that will be the line. Tough on inflation.
What we're really going to talk as tough as the government. The government obviously talks about an inflation objective of 2.5% in the medium term. Our inflation objective will be 2.5% or less. Certainly won't be laxer than that. But as well as talking tough, we'll deliver. Let's leave them in there.
Yeah. That was there's murder, that is, because
that's hard work. What we're doing is we aren't actually making an announcement that this is our inflation target, but we want them all to write, this is our inflation target.
But
and there's a slight kind of, you know, delicate balance there, because they can't use any Gordon words, but we want them to say our inflation target will be Labour gave the clearest signal yet, and that's kind of, you know, so what you're wanting them to do, so they say, but are you saying it's 2.5% or less? And you say, we're saying that we won't simply talk as tough as the Conservatives, whose target is 2.5%. Hey, but are you saying it?
I'll tell you what we should have done is maybe sit down at that table, you see, because what happened was the Independent boys just dominated it. They're obsessed with the windfall levy, right? Aren't they? Anyway, we just told them, in the end, I just told them.
I might go and have a quick word with the Independent people now, but
yeah, but if you go back in, you're going to...
No, well...
Why are they obsessed with the windfall? Oh, God knows.
What do you think, Charlie?
Probably because Andy Mars is obsessed
with it. What do you think?
The thing is, if you go back in, they might sort of reopen, you know.
I won't talk to anybody else. I just kind of want them to be...
Okay.
Well, I think at 4 o'clock people wanted a few jokes and wanted a bit of humour. But I think what was interesting was that they did listen, and they were keen to hear about what we were saying about the individual things. I didn't say that I'd be happy to come back next year, but I would inform them of any change of address. The budget day is very, very important, because you're looking at tax, spending, a whole series of announcements, but at the same time, of course, they want the headline of a tax cut or something out as well, and we've got to show what it actually means in practice.
I can't imagine Kenneth Clark is doing this at this moment.
I don't know if it makes you less tired or more tired by the end of the day.
So what's happened over the last few days is there's no such thing as budget purdah, and there's no such thing as budget secrets. The whole thing's...
Is that your joke?
Well, I had to try and explain to Rosie last night, who was 6, what a budget was.
How do you
She
explain
didn't
it?
see the
Like Mummy's household budget. Spend, 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 and then somebody pays the bills. That old guilt market.
Thank you, Ed. I'm blushing now. I'd worked for Jim Callaghan, Michael Foot and Neil Kinnock, and I was there in 79. And in 79, we never thought it was going to be 18 years. You know, I can remember in 83 thinking, you know, she can't get in, not another time. And then in 87, you began to believe that possibly it might happen. In 92, well, because of having so many defeats, I never thought we'd have an overall majority, but I thought we'd win. But if we didn't win this time, it would be devastating.
Are you happy to use 2,000 as the figure for tax rather than 600, which you used this morning, Ed? And I think we should go with 2,000.
Yeah, although, you see, if you say 7p up, 2p down, leaves you 5 pence worse off, you convert that as a figure that is actually £600. Cumulatively over the Parliament, it's more than 2,000.
But I don't think people remember the 7p. I mean, I think we're going to stick to sort of 2 messages. They can't remember.
22 tax rises.
22 tax rises,
costing
£2,000.
Carol, it's safe.
Okay.
It's pretty tense because this is the last throes of the government. It's their last chance, and we're all a bit tense about what are they going to fling in, what are they going to surprise us with.
Ed?
Yeah.
Do you think you will be able to actually have the £2,000 number in advance?
Well, not if we don't know what they're doing on the other allowances and all that stuff.
If it's the case that the Tories can use today and tomorrow to relaunch the Conservative Party as a party which they can be trusted on tax and the economy, then that will cause us problems. Therefore, our job is to make sure that they don't get away with that. It's going to be over £2,000? Yeah, definitely. Well, because that's on a poster tomorrow morning. So if that was wrong, we'd be in trouble.
Pre-budget or post? What's sitting in the studio for the whole budget? I'm not sure they want to do that, do we?
Yeah, unless you've got something else to do.
What can you say about Clark? You couldn't be a Labour Chancellor because Labour Chancellor's got to be serious. I mean, he's not a really serious man. He's not seen as serious. I think he's been a lucky Chancellor. I've got regard for him.
Is it out of the budget?
He gave me 10 quid the other day. Why? Because he bet me 10 quid that Harriet Harman would get the sack. Sending her kid to a posh school. He lost that one, and he's going to lose the election.
Right, it's by 90.
Is that a minus?
It's a minus, yes.
But I thought you said it would increase health service spending in real terms every year. Well, information filters through. It doesn't come in one go. You get information gradually. You get the public spending figure, but you don't find out what's happened to health and for another hour. And you've got to have people there looking at what the government's saying and looking at whether that adds up. Every year. So it rises next year, and then it falls
the year after.
Well, that's a killer.
That is your top line.
Nobody's in any doubt about that. Surely this is a killer on the health service. That the next year it may rise in real terms, but the year after it's going to fall. What do we make of his promise to the Conservative Party conference? That's it.
But my first aim is the lasting health of the British economy.
For the news this evening, the most important thing is what Tony says in the chamber once Clark's made his speech. So what we've got to do is get any new information we can into Tony as quickly as possible so that he can do a response which is on the ball. But the important thing from our point of view is we have a calculation about how much tax people have paid since '92. And what we want to do is use that as a headline number, £2,000 extra taxes since '92. If anything happens in the Chancellor's speech which changes that, makes it higher or makes it lower, that's the number we want to get in and do it as quick as possible. That's what Tony will say. That's what Gordon will say in the studios. For the next 4 months, that's what all our candidates all around the country are going to be saying about the budget and about tax. If we get it right, that's good. If we get it wrong, then it's bad.
Today, leave the average British family £2,120 worse off in tax.
One thing you can say about Labour, after 17 years of being in opposition, we're quite professional at it. What we really want to do is be on the other side of the dispatch box, actually giving the budget. That'll be, the real business. At the moment, this is all, this is all petty politics, I think.
vote for the Conservatives at the next election, won't they?
No, I don't think so, because the first thing...
In normal years, I wouldn't do as many as this, but as we're coming up to the election, I think we'll do everything, every medium we can get our message over.
22 tax rises. When the Chancellor said that,
22 times.
I think doing lots of interviews in one day is quite difficult, because you tend to start warming up, then you get a bit better, and then repetition doesn't actually make you any better. Well, I want to thank everybody for what they did, because this has been an amazing few days, and in terms of all the things that have happened, haven't they? The Europe, the budget. Yeah, but it's not the election not finished.
There's 150 days to go.
But 150 days to the election.
149.
Quite simple, really, what we're doing. Except nobody knows we're doing it, which makes it a bit tense.
Gordon Brown and his team have a decision to announce that will make this weekend one of the most important before the election. For a party that feels it lost the last election because of its tax and public spending policies, the question of a top rate of tax of 50% is a difficult one. It's long been argued over, and as yet no one knows the outcome.
We wanted to assure people about public spending first, and that was the purpose of the Sunday newspaper stories about public sector pay and about public spending.
First of his series of economic speeches, Shadow Chancellor Gordon Brown will show how Labour will implement its save-to-spend approach by announcing a 2-year clampdown on public spending.
Well, I guess this is Gordon's major economic speech before the election, and so obviously we've been working on this for some time now. I mean, obviously, in many ways it's summing up a lot of what Gordon has been doing over the last 4 years and sort of bringing that to fruition.
Anyway, look, I'm not going to spend all afternoon arguing with you, but if you wrote anything other than we will be tough on public spending, I'm going to come and beat you up. From day one, Gordon's been killing the spending argument. Now, I mean, if you said a year ago we could get away with not having a new top rate of tax, there's no chance, in my view. We've been so successful in being tough on public spending that tax looks after itself. It's public spending is the real issue, it's not tax.
The next thing to do was to announce what the consequences were for tax. So it was a planned strategy, but for a political party, an element of surprise is important when you're announcing decisions.
We're pre-recording everything tonight, so all the morning news bulletins will be all on tough on public spending. And then probably on the Today programme, Gordon will tell them that he's going to announce our tax plans in the speech at 3 o'clock that day. Then the balloon will go up, and then everybody will be desperate to know what we're going to say and everything like that.
I spoke to Jim Nofty on
Once again, Labour intend to use the BBC Radio Morning News programme today to break their story. That means the other breakfast programmes recording interviews tonight have to be kept in the dark.
The speech is primarily about public expenditure, but you may want to ask him how does it relate to his tax plans, because he may be prepared to say something.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the story we're going to do tomorrow is going to be tax, not spending. And I couldn't have Gordon going in live. And when asked, you know, so today, will you say anything about tax? He can't lie. So it's just as well get them all over with tonight, really.
So taxes aren't going to go up?
Well, you know, we haven't said that. We'll have to wait until Gordon's speeches.
Okay, well, we thought it was going to be this one, because Blair trailed it, didn't he, saying that it's going to be next week?
No, he did.
He did.
Did he? Oh,
yeah, he did. He said that,
I don't recall that.
Gordon Brown, he said he wouldn't go any further. He said that until Gordon Brown speaks in his speech next week. That's what he said.
I know, he said in a series of speeches.
Right, okay. Okay. But what about the basic rate of 10p?
Basic rate?
The taxes rate won't go up. They can't go down either, can they? If the spending control is going to stay the same...
taxes won't go up. I've said Gordon will announce this in his speeches.
What did you just say to me? You just said taxes...
I said Gordon, Tony Gordon.
Nobody wants to see taxes go up.
Of course not. Everybody wants to pay less tax.
They won't go up. Okay, so nobody wants higher taxes, but you accept that they may have to go up.
Well, I didn't say that either. I said you have to wait until Gordon's speech.
First of all, just put your name and title on tape so we've got a bit of level.
Gordon Brown. MP.
MP. Okay, Gordon, this speech later today, what is your main message?
That we've got to keep the public finances in order, and to do that we must have the most careful choice of priorities. And I'm not going to make promises that I cannot keep, and I'm going to keep the promises that I make.
It started early on in the day, because earlier on I got a call from Charlie saying, you know, Gordon's doing a round of interviews and briefing the papers very heavily this afternoon. They're going to go really big on it. They're going to splash in the papers. So everybody gets sort of excited about the story. And before you know it, you're sort of you're doing exactly what they want you to do, which is running after this tale. And then you suddenly sit back and you think, well, actually there's nothing new here. And if I were to say to Charlie, I think I did there, I would ask about tax and say, come on, Charlie, come on, isn't it time that Gordon started talking about tax? Then you'd have the bluster back from Charlie, oh, don't be ridiculous, Sean, you know, nobody's running that story, nobody's expecting that.
No, you just have to be economical with the truth. So you have to say things like, Gordon will make them in one of his speeches. I'm not going to tell you that. You do really, you should never lie, but it's very difficult. But they understand. They'll all understand tomorrow, and forgive me.
We've been promised that Gordon's going to be talking, unveiling his tax plans, but it still isn't going to come, and that's why I think Charlie's actually being so hard at pressing a story about no extra spending, no more public spending, because I think they want to disguise the fact that we're still not going to hear Labour's tax plans.
The choice is between doing everything in the morning or doing spending in the morning and only briefing on tax after lunch. That is your choice.
You don't want really hard doing.
So we've got to make up our mind.
I think we just stick to what we've always wanted to do and tell Notty to ask a question about tax at the end.
What I'd really like, in a perfect world to happen, is you'd have the whole interview on public spending.
And
then right at the very end, just say, but I will be announcing the tax. You know, and then he'll be going, you know, what, and then you'd have to answer what they are.
It is because of the importance we attach to work, and because people have been dealt such a harsh blow over these last few years, that we will leave the basic rate of tax unchanged, and we will leave the top rate of tax unchanged. And what I want to do over time, when resources become available, is introduce what is absolutely vital for the low paid in this country in particular, but to benefit of everyone, a 10p starting rate of tax.
Let's get this absolutely clear. This, at last, is the Brown statement on tax. In your first budget, you will leave the basic rate and the top rate unchanged.
I will be making commitments for our manifesto, which are commitments for a parliament, and the basic rate and the top rate of tax will remain unchanged.
Throughout the parliament?
Yes.
It's perfect. Because it actually was quite...
It was on principle.
Yeah, it was quite it sort of hit you know, everybody would have leapt out of their seats.
Well, the public spending is a bit around the course.
Yeah, well, I don't know why he went so long on public spending.
Well, you didn't know what we were talking about. I thought he was going to ask me about the windfall tax. I was begging him to do so.
Yeah,
well, it was exactly the message we wanted. Brown aims at 2-year freeze on spending. Brown backs Tory cash. Labour to pledge 2-year spending freeze. Now we'll get straight on to tax. I mean, they would have been gobsmacked when Gordon said on his day programme, and yes, I can announce no tax increases. That would have thrown the whole of Central Office into disarray. Now, they've got time to recover, but to be quite honest, you know, Gordon's got a big speech in the evening, or early evening. We should go really big on all the news bulletins, so far so good.
Brown's tax and spending package announced today will be pulled together in a speech at this London Conference Centre this afternoon. It could well turn out to be the most significant speech of Labour's pre-election campaign, certainly the most significant of Gordon Brown's political career.
The Conservatives try to claim that Labour will penalise work and success by raising tax rates. Nothing could be further from the truth. And as a signal of the importance we attach to rewarding work, I want to make it clear that I will not increase the top rate of tax.
Over this weekend, the Labour Party have mounted a quite astonishing operation in which they've prepared the ground. A little bit of the stories out in the Sunday newspapers, a little bit dribbled out last night, full morning headlines this morning, but the morning headlines this morning were about keeping down public sector pay. I think, frankly, for a party in opposition to really control the agenda for 3 days is quite an operation. The line about the top rate of tax, that we knew, but we didn't know he was going to announce it today. And the Conservatives, I think, were not expecting that he was going to announce that today, and so it got them, I think, a bit flummoxed. They will really tear into Gordon
in the weeks and months ahead to say, he may look like a new modern Chancellor to you, but we know he's the same old Chancellor like any other Labour Chancellor there's ever been, and that's where one of the real battles is going to be fought, around Gordon Brown.
We're doing a feature for The Independent on Sunday, and we're trying to really get behind the politician to look at the man.
Yeah.
How long have you lived here?
Maybe it looks as if it's about 10 minutes.
Did you buy for the view?
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Also because it's near the station and it's near the airport. And when it came up, I just bid so high to get it.
Okay, good.
Yesterday we spent the day going round looking at his surgeries, talking to the ordinary people who come to see him to get help with their problems.
That's lovely.
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. Like, you know, say, I mean, they can find 60 million for a new royal yacht, like.
Well, we're not going ahead with that.
My head at this moment is bursting. I can't sleep at night, but as soon as I wake up in the morning, this is what I think about.
We were incredibly impressed with the sort of respect that he is held in up here. He puts an awful lot of work into that, and in many senses he doesn't have to, because he would win this seat anyway, because it's such a safe Labour seat. So he doesn't have to do the hours that he puts in here. If he just sat in London, he would still win the seat. He does have interests outside politics. He likes to watch sport, he likes rugby, he likes football, but he doesn't really do anything else because, first of all, there's no time for it. This is someone who is working 18 hours a day without a pause, and there is nothing else.
I'm going to the Wirral by-election on Monday morning. I'm going to America on Tuesday, New York Wednesday, Washington Thursday, Britain Friday.
Hi. And we did our first interview with John Sargent at 7.
Why the Consul General's coming, I just do not know. I mean, this is a Labour Party dinner.
Bianca Jagger's coming.
She's not.
Where are you going from here?
We're going back to Britain, see if an election's been declared.
What Brown and his team came back to find wasn't the calling of the election, but a surprise announcement of the big idea for the Conservative manifesto. A complete change to the way pensions are to be funded. The Prime Minister held his press conference in the morning. Labour decides to respond by the early afternoon, giving Gordon Brown an hour to come up with his statement.
Hi. Gordon's meeting with David this afternoon at 3:30. It won't now happen because Gordon's got to do a press conference on the pensions thing.
Under today's proposals, there will first of all no longer be a state pension covering everyone. So this is privatisation of the basic state pension, starting with under 25s, eventually. Have they said under 25s or just starting with the young?
Tories have come up with some scamboli, which is actually going to cost billions of pounds of pensions, trying to make out people will be better off. I think they've dropped a huge clanger, because most people fear for their pensions, they don't want change. Anyway, our task at the moment is to sabotage it. We've got 20 minutes before the press conference.
Oh, that's great. There you are. The total cost is 150 billion.
And the figures don't add up anyway, so it's a good chance for us to hit the pensioner vote, which is quite weak for us. But the pensioners will be very worried about what the Tories are doing, quite rightly so.
Just look at this here. Look. So they're not guaranteeing every pension at £175 a week. They also say they will guarantee the basic pension. The basic pension is not £175 a week.
No, all they're guaranteeing is the basic pension.
Let's see it.
Well, they suggest
No, there's no guarantee on that. That's
there's no guarantee on that.
That's a mistake.
So just to cut these two lines, yes?
Yes, Jolly
The
good.
basic pension, the basic state pension.
Yeah.
This is terribly important because they're denying it.
Yeah.
They're frightened of it. They're obviously frightened of it.
The cumulative cost of the government's new proposals from 1998 to 2014 is a massive £151 billion that has got to be found from public spending. A Department of Social Security official told an inquiry agency this morning that the proposals had not been thought out. I think that will be the country's verdict as well. Harriet Harman.
What can you again say about the richness and diversity of a newspaper? In 1937, that editorial board, Aneurin Bevan, Ellen Wilkinson, Harold Lasky, Stafford Cripps, William Mellor, great socialists. Then, great editors like Michael Foot, writers like Wells and Shaw, Osborne and Brain, C.D. Lewis, John Betjeman, all gracing the columns of Tribune over the years. And perhaps, when we look back, the most distinguished contributor of them all, an ex-public school boy who talked a great deal in the columns of Tribune about the future of Britain. Blair. Blair himself. Eric Blair, George Orwell. Now, these achievements should persuade us to rededicate our efforts over these next few weeks to achieve in our time not just a Labour government, but a Labour government committed to dignity in work, to policies for social justice, to equal opportunity for all. When people ask us where the Labour Party stands, where the Labour movement stands, let us say with one voice, the Labour movement stands on these great issues of principle where it always did, not on the shifting sands of expedience, but on the solid rock of social justice. That is our task, and that, friends, will be our achievement. Thank you.
And I believe this election is winnable. Not only do I think it's winnable, I think I'm going to win this election, and so are the Conservative Party.
Nick, Charlie, sorry, I forgot to tell you that we're going to Basildon this afternoon. The battle for Basildon, the betrayal of Basildon. Gordon. We're going on 2 o'clock from Fenchurch Street. We've got quite, I don't know who's coming, there's quite a lot of journalists coming.
Why Basildon?
Why Basildon, though?
Well, funnily enough, I was a person on television in an interview just at the moment that the Basildon result was declared in 1992. And I was actually the person who had to answer when people said, well, you're not going to win the general election if you can't win Basildon.
What was your answer?
What?
What was your answer?
I said, there's a long way to go. But that was 5 years it took.
The New Labour is not the party of Tony Blair. It was Gordon Brown's creation. More than anyone else in the Labour Party, he reshaped the Labour Party. It was mainly his ideas that have created, New Labour. Everybody would have assumed it would have been Gordon that would have replaced John Smith, and it wasn't to be. So this election, he's going to move from being Shadow Chancellor to Chancellor. It's second best. He knew he could have been Prime Minister.
What we really need is a Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer. It's a very great pleasure tonight to welcome to Basildon and to introduce to you Gordon Brown.
Are able now to have more contact with the Treasury. We've also had a number of projects which we've been running in different places with different outside consultants and people. And now it's the final few weeks to make sure that they're all finished and done and ready to be tested by the civil service. And the other thing is on the windfall tax. We want to make sure that we arrive on the 1st of May with not only the idea of a windfall tax, but also a clear position in terms of the accounting of it, the drafting of the legislation, the legal position, all of the financial numbers. And we'll have that all ready and all the documentation prepared so we can arrive on the 1st of May, drop it on the desk of the Permanent Secretary and say, now implement this.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Hi, how are you?
William, I'll be looking after you. Good.
Good. Hi, cheers.
Hi.
Yeah.
Which way do we go? This way?
Opening statement, you first, then Ken Clark, then Malcolm Bruce. Closing statement, you first, then Malcolm Bruce, then Ken Clark. So it's fine.
He gets the last word.
Well, so what?
Malcolm Bruce gets the last word.
Clark won't be able to resist commenting on your closing statement, so we will set the terms of the closing statement. No closing. So it won't change his opening statement.
Which is timeless.
Go.
Britain can do better, a lot better. A new government must equip our country for the future. End the cycle of boom and bust.
Hi there. Makeup.
The journalists, when they've arrived, you can take me up to where the journalists are, yeah? Okay.
But it all depends on if we can get enough space in there, because it's so small, that press gallery upstairs.
I'll try and just push in. It's quite important.
If we can't get both of you in there, we'll get one of you in there.
Okay. I think the key thing is that you don't
get partisan.
Don't get partisan. Just smile, right, and not make heckle and laugh, and be absolutely confident. Even if Gordon's getting pasted, it's a complete act for an hour. That Gordon's completely stuffed Clark, and he's brilliant. Yeah, but he will be anyway, so it doesn't really.
The good thing is that once he's doing, the fact that he's doing his opening statement first, it's very good news from our point of view, because he'll do a statement, he'll get it out, and he'll sit back and he'll watch them, and he'll be thinking all the time. And the other thing is, while we were up there, we read on Peter J's notebook, the order of the questions.
Oh, did you?
Tax, inflation, Europe, unemployment, competitiveness and the trend rate of growth of the economy.
Is that what you were doing?
So at moments like this, you become glad you're not a politician. It's bad enough just having to watch the fucking thing.
Hello. We don't know how to pay for them, and these would threaten our recovery. Brown, I was calling you to conclude your remark.
There are no public expenditure commitments that require increases in taxes. The Institute of Fiscal Studies said quite clearly our programme was costed and is headed out.
There are other important matters to discuss, and one of them is inflation. There are other important people here, including Mr. Malcolm Bruce. Mr. Bruce.
I said, Charlie, I hope I said, Mark Lawson's here, who's quite important, and he wants to have a quiet, off-the-record word about the format of TV debates and what you thought of it.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. Can you get in here?
Yeah.
Can you get him to come in here?
Yeah.
Go tell the truth, but still do.
Well, the problem is that every time it gets going from you and Clark, which is great, they have to interrupt it to get Bruce in.
But
I know our line has got to be 3 ways, isn't it?
I mean,
anyway, I thought you must be really pleased. Absolutely great. Absolutely.
It was very focused.
And
it was a bit too focused, but...
And we were quite right about the format, in that the questions to Clark.
All the way through, questioning Clark, absolutely.
Superb.
You better have a
I'm desperate.
The next one will not be like that, because that will be the audience version.
No. Hiya.
Hi, Mr. Brown. Mark Lawson.
Yeah, good to see you.
This is off the record. Off the record.
Have a seat.
Yeah.
Do you want a cup of coffee, Mark?
Yes, please.
Do you want to feed away?
So, clearly, as a...
Did you watch this?
Absolutely, yeah. As a format, what do you make of it?
We now this morning, in my view, in what is a defining moment of this election campaign, see a Conservative party that is revealed as unfit to govern.
I took the decision that we should go into that, and it fell apart, and it caused damage. Don't think that I'm not scarred by having taken that decision.
My goodness.
So don't think I'm not cautious about an even bigger decision than the entry into the exchange rate mechanism. There is a dividing line. In any decision to be made, there is a balance of advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, but everybody sitting there will feel he has not answered the question. You've got ministers you say are unwise. How can unwise people be in your government?
It is not the case that EMU necessarily involves steps in those directions, and people who keep asserting it are people who are a little fallible on the details of the policy and therefore decide to make it easier from their point of view to try to make us exercise our option now.
You know you're debating with him tonight, don't you?
At the summit
Channel 4 News.
and in Ecofin.
But, I mean, to be honest, today's the first day in my book that it has taken off.
Sort of drama.
But how did it take off? It took off without us. With an assault on his own magnates.
But you didn't get an apology of any real consequence.
No, and of course you saw the Eric Forth performance.
Eric Forth is pretty clear.
Very clear. And there'll be more. Were you watching any of the other faces at this morning's press conference? Perhaps they weren't transmitted.
No, we just see just the Prime Minister.
Ken looked very unhappy indeed. It was as if it was sort of kind of coming home to roost.
So you've got 4 government ministers who've broken from the policy. And I asked Kenneth Clarke, what guarantee can you give that you would have anything other than a divided government incapable of representing British interests in Europe? What are you going to do about these fundamental divisions in your party? You've got a party that is not being led.
But what I strongly challenge, what undermines, I think, Gordon's case, is his argument that minister after minister defies. These ministers, when pressed, have all said they accept the government's policy. Of course they do. Ministers accept government policy. They have served for 5 years in a government which has had the same policy.
The other thing is, where are we going to take these Tory divisions now?
Well, I think we see what happens at the Conservative press conference today, and I think Major is bound to be asked about Redwood in particular, and why he's still being defied.
But what's he going to say about that? Because I mean, it's a sort of, it's almost as if the story's so bad they don't want to do it. You know, because it's just the Tories are divided again.
I know, but half the questions at the press conference today were about Europe. So Europe is continuing to be an issue. Now, it can either be an issue because of what we are saying about Europe and the focus has gone on to us from the Tories, or it's an issue because the divisions in the Tory party are still the central issue. And I think it will remain an issue today. I think, as far as the health service, I don't think we actually got it up strongly enough. You know, I don't think the claim was precise enough. So I think in your speech this evening, it's about the NHS not there when you need it. I think that's quite important.
Right.
I think that's the phrase. You know, why don't put it sort of every pensioner must ask the question. Every parent must ask the question. Will the health service be there when I need it? Is that the way to do it?
Yeah.
Well, I'll write that up.
Can you do me some stuff on that?
Yeah. The question that every pensioner should ask.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. It's the right way of putting it. You see, I mean, the trouble is trying to break through in this campaign. Talk about anything other than, you know, it's like the Tory sleaze, Tory divisions. I mean, it's just a nightmare trying to get anything else up.
Yeah, I know.
I don't come in for the 7 o'clock. That's the one meeting I really can't manage. And so Charlie does the 7 o'clock. So I tend to come in for about 7:30, which is just prior to the 8:30 press conference, so it's getting ready for the press conference.
Can I first of all welcome you today to today's press conference, the beginning of a new and exciting week of campaigning.
Watch the Tory press conference and then have an 11 o'clock meeting and see how the day has gone and what needs to be done before the lunchtime news and how to kind of develop it if a statement needs to go out or a message to key campaigners. Then there's the lunchtime newses.
New Labour, it seems, has travelled even further than many thought possible.
They're not going on one issue.
Then we have another campaign meeting at 3:30. Then there's meetings and preparations for the next day's press conference.
You want a statement from someone, a big player?
No, this is for his local stuff. We're doing it nationally.
And then watch the early evening bulletins, and then we have another final meeting at 6:30. And then if things still need to be got ready for the next day, then you stay here until that's done. So it does get very long.
This is where the business community would like us to be.
I can imagine that the press would think that it wasn't an interesting campaign because we're not gaffing all over the place, but that's the kind of party we now are, so we're not going to go down that path of screwing up as we maybe did so spectacularly in the past.
£50 for every household. He's about to start it.
Well done, Gordon. I thought you did really well on that.
is there going to be a Labour government? And I think yes. Are we complacent? No. Are we taking anything for granted? I don't think so. Will we win? In my view, yes, and I think fairly decisively. Will Tony Blair be Prime Minister? Yes. Will he choose me as Chancellor? Well, that's a matter for 10 days from now, but I hope so, and I expect to be in a position to do these things.
I didn't think he would make it. He was so busy, and we thought, oh, it's out of the question. But he reappeared, so it was a very pleasant surprise. He was a very good academic, he was a very good student, but he was keen on sport too, you know, very keen on sport, which was sort of interrupted by the accident he had to his eye, you know. He lost the sight of one eye.
It's been great to be here. I'm sorry it's such a short visit, but you'll understand I've been called away.
We may be biased, of course, but we think that he answers very well when he's being questioned, that he presents his case very well without hesitation.
Take care.
The most difficult job is an actual apart from the leader, because you've got to answer questions on everything.
Yeah.
You've got to know everything.
Yeah. What about Peter? Has his relationship improved, or does it not?
You know, you're in a general election, and there's no question, there's no room for any differences. And there are, you know, I mean, in the election there are now, you just get on and do it.
Yeah. All these reports of the great silences and all that.
That's just all shit, you know. I mean, you know, when I just left just now, I mean, Gordon was sat at my desk next to me. I mean, they're having a long chat. I mean, they just chat all the time. It's just great. I mean, you're in meetings for hours together. The idea that you're not.
Gordon and Peter Mandelson are never going to be buddies. It's a hellish relationship. There's been a lot of stories of them not talking to each other and disagreements over who should actually be leading the campaign, and I think a lot of that has happened. But in spite of that, I think they've managed to establish a sort of professional rapport. The media have been trivialised because politics has been trivialised. But it suits the politicians to have it that way. They fought a defensive campaign. That means you present the minimum, the smallest possible target to the Tory party, and that means you give as little policy detail as possible. When you've no policy detail, it's difficult to be anything other than fairly trivial.
Good evening. This is Gordon Brown, your Labour candidate, asking you to vote this evening to elect a Labour government.
He holds it with a majority of 19,600, and this is the swing, the key figure we're waiting for, an 11% swing from Conservative to Labour, and that broadly confirms what our exit poll was telling us. We're in line for a Labour landslide.
Well, we're going to get at least 100. It's exactly as I predicted.
They're not the buddies of old. Tony Blair is the leader of the Labour Party, so it's impossible to have that kind of camaraderie. But I think they're still friends. I think they still trust each other. I'm sure deep in the sort of recesses of Gordon's heart, he still hopes to be the leader of the Labour Party one day.
Gordon Brown, the Labour Party candidate, 24,000.
16% swing to Labour.
They've lost each with safest seat in Scotland. Have they? They'll lose every seat in Scotland. But
They could do.
They could.
This is the man in charge of the purse.
We are now today the People's Party. Finally, all these years, We have been people saying but never given the chance to do. And yet the only purpose in being in politics is to do, to get things done, to make things happen. Now we have the chance to make things happen. And we shall make this country as proud of us as tonight we are proud of them. Thank you very much.